What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Roots and Streams podcast. I am your host, Matthew Llamas. In today's episode, I've been busy with that other opportunity, right? That's all I really said about 2 or 3 episodes ago. Coming back from conference, didn't get that job, but I came back fortunately to this opportunity with a really good friend of mine, and we still can't, I really want to share with everyone, and I'm going to be excited when we fully can. We've taken so many steps in moving this thing forward, and it's been nice to be a part of something where I can give my 100% and not be trying to do all the other things. So we're really close. We're so close. I almost could have told you today we were so close, but we're just waiting a little bit longer. There's just some nuts and bolts that sometimes when you have, starting opportunities like this, you have to wait a little bit. And I'm just trying to be okay with that. And I'm excited. And I want to share a little bit of kind of what it's been like for me just personally, still navigating some uncertainty, some challenges in my faith, some fear, some anxiety, and wondering if this new opportunity, right? This new opportunity that I'm going to be taking on, when you are doing something new, like somebody pointed out to me recently, I think it was Andres, who's been on this podcast. Sometimes it's like new muscles that you are working out, and they just take time to work up to the new thing that you're doing, right? When you work out for the first time or a couple of times, that muscle is going to be sore because it needs to react. It needs to get stronger. And I feel like that's been happening to me a little bit. I haven't been necessarily focused or in working on things so constantly in the past year or so, so focused on things and really having tasks to go from and multitask and things like that. Multitask. I don't believe in multitasking, but in its truest form. And just mentally, it has been a challenge. And I'm wondering, man, is this anxiety because I'm so stressed about getting this right? Or somebody pointed out, maybe it's just a muscle that's getting stronger. So I think maybe it's that. And I thought that was a good perspective to have. And also still trying to make time to have my time with God and pray in the morning and do my Bible study. And I am maybe even doing it at a pace where I won't be able to once this thing really launches. And so I'm just grateful for it. I may have to wake up a lot earlier to get that part of my day going. But that is another thing. So things might be changing for me a little bit, schedule and program wise daily for me. And this may be the last episode of not entirely, because I do plan on keeping this podcast going and maybe even just recording it from a different space or a different time, or maybe every other week. But this may be the last episode for this season, right? This is episode 9. I usually go, I think the longest season I went was 13 episodes, but every quarter or so I take a break, and this one won't be necessarily scheduled. I thought maybe I can get closer to the end of the holiday season, and take that time off. But I think for sure this next week, I'm going to be very busy doing things for that, this venture that I am taking on. And so next week, I don't see myself having time to record this. So I'll for sure just hear, if you've heard this long, at least and you're an active listener, you're just someone who listens consistently, there most likely won't be an episode. Nothing's wrong if you don't talk to me personally. Just busy with something else. And hopefully maybe I can do a short episode or post, once I can announce things and talk about what's next in this area of my life. So just wanted to get that out there. Trying to think of any other house things. I think that's it. But there has been ups and downs, even making this next move forward. Now I'm worried about, is everything going to work out? Is everything going to move forward as it should, right? Because when you apply for a job and just get the job, typically we don't worry about a business going bankrupt, like a business that we're working for, like a large company. and us being out of a job the next day. Even though these things happen, they happen maybe more often than we'd like. And we think that they can happen. However, when we have a job at a big company, for the most part, it's steady, right? Even though I've been a part of a company that went bankrupt, I just fortunately was one of the very few people who had, just the way my job was set up, there was another organization that can pay for my salary, and they took me on. But probably like 99.9% of the company that I was working for, they were laid off like from like day-to-day notice. Like nobody knew, and it was pretty crazy. So I have like been around and a part of that and seen it. However, when we usually have a job though, it's just like I get my paycheck, it's nice and steady, and just do my work. And with this other thing, it's not necessarily going to be like that. It's going to be more so like a business, and it's going to be based on ebbs and flows and things like that. And it's kind of worrisome knowing going into that, like, is it going to work out? Is it not going to work out? What are these things that maybe can go wrong? And if you own a business, you kind of probably know what I'm talking about, some things that keep you up at night. And so I still have nights where it's difficult to go to sleep. And something practical, if you read the Bible at all, or even if you don't, it's probably one of the most common, if you are familiar with the Bible at all, like Psalms 23. There's songs about Psalms 23. And for me, that's kind of been, as corny as it sounds, my nightlight. Like if I can't sleep at night, and it's most nights, I try to read Psalms 23, and it just reminds me how God is my shepherd, and he makes sure that he lays me down in a place where it's just overflowing, and I have everything I need, and that I am going to prosper and be successful and be blessed, even when there's people that are against me, right? And they're just like right around me, and I will still be blessed and be able to enjoy it in peace. It's just a really great psalm, and I probably fought it for a while trying to read it or use it, because it's just, to me, so overtly used. But I had to just cave in, and it's been great. So if you have trouble sleeping at night, I would suggest Psalms 23 and read that and use it as often as you do. And I hope that works for me. It works for me. I hope that works for you. It works for me. So that's a little bit about that. And, something I wrote down, like, I think in the faith that you have with whatever is going on in your life, and when you have doubts, or it's scary, or you get anxious or stressed, it doesn't mean always that we don't have faith. I think it's just our faith is getting tested. And really, I would be kind of questioning somebody who has faith with no doubt. Like, is that even faith if you don't doubt it at all? Or if there's nothing that can go wrong? Like, I'm not sure. Like, because I know Jesus had times where he was scared and cried, and, even asked, his heavenly Father to take away what was about to happen to him. Like, he was anxious, he was scared, it was really difficult, and it was testing his faith. So I think we are we are susceptible, and we are definitely going to have similar experiences. So it's comforting to know that. It doesn't make it necessarily any easier, but I know that it doesn't mean like that I'm a bad person, or that I'm a bad Christian, or a bad son of God, because I'm getting a little doubtful. It's like, but what do I do as fast as I can? And that's one thing I took from conference that I was sharing with my tribe, that is another practical step, is that when we have that accuser and that thing saying, you're not going to make it, this is going to go bad in your business, or this is going to go bad with you and your marriage, or this is going to go bad to your kids at school, or you don't know how to treat your kids, you're not a good father, you're going to fail at school, whatever it is that's accusing you and telling you and making you anxious about whatever's going on in your life, we have the ability to rebuke that. And one of the quickest ways is to worship God in song, in prayer. And that, for me at least, refocuses, like, all right, God is in control. He is my Father, and He has peace and joy that's meant for me in my life, whether or not like I keep this house, whether or not I have, this much space or this much food. Like He will always be bringing me joy and blessings and love in my life. If I focus on Him and worship Him, then it's like, okay, I can settle down a little bit. Like things probably aren't going to go that bad. And even if they do, like there's people that you can lean on and that are going to be a blessing to you. And it's like all things work together, right? Like I said in my last one, work together for good, and just reminding ourselves of that. So that's kind of like practical things, some things that I've been going through daily. And going back to, I know it may not be that interesting, and definitely views are down, but it's okay. I do want to get guests on here again. I know guests definitely bring in more views and maybe more interesting stories and topics and conversations to watch two people go back and forth, and to hear personal stories more than just my own, just vlogging by myself, just kind of this being a diary. I had somebody reach out to me last week, and I want to bring her on. Just thinking about like finding time in the right space. So it may be soon, it may be later, and I do want to get back into bringing guests on. Just gotta be more organized with that. But I do hope to bring that for everyone who watches regularly and enjoys watching me and learn from guests and to hear their stories and to dive in to other people's testimonies and journeys. But however, what I've been on is this kind of Bible reading plan of sorts that, again, if you've been following along, it's like essentially what an ancient Israelite would have been taught, like in their Bible school, in their Torah school, and grown up hearing stories about, and like the main parts in the Old Testament that would have been pointing to an anticipated Savior, anticipated Messiah that would kind of redeem them and save them, and would ultimately be this promise that God had for them, that there would be this Son of God that would be like the ultimate king for them. And so I've been doing that, and right now I'm reading through Isaiah, and Isaiah is like one of the main prophets. And a prophet is somebody who typically is telling the people like, hey, here's everything you did wrong, and here's why everything's going bad, and why it's that, and what is God, how God is punishing us, and how we need to turn back towards Him and His loving ways, and the ways He's trying to show us that we can be a more loving, joyful, peaceful, equality type of society, and, to help have just more justice and things like that. So they're definitely spewing that out. And they're also typically prophecies about what's to come. What are the promises that God has, the good things that God has? So Isaiah is very much known for talking about this promised prince and this promised Son of God. But I want to start with, one thing that stood out to me, because it connects to the sermon that we listened to on Sunday at Freedom Church. And I hope you can stay with me. But in Isaiah 11, so it's talking about this prince that's coming, right? This prince that's going to be coming to bring peace. And he's going to like slay the wickedness, and he's going to have righteousness and faithfulness around his waist. And right, it's explaining this person that's going to be coming. And then it's talking about what it's going to be like when he does come. And there's descriptors and some metaphors and illustrations that are talked about here about the wolf dwelling with the lamb, the leopard laying with the goat, the calf and the lion, the cow and the bear will graze together. The lion will eat straw with the ox. So you see all of these like opposite things that are usually not together and usually are enemies to each other, that are in this new world, that this new well, it says like branch from Jesse. So all that means is just like this new king that comes from the line of the people that God has chosen, that there will be this new peaceful reality in the peaceful society, that there won't be enemies anymore, and there'll be no need to fight, and there'll be no need to kill each other or eat each other. It's like it's talking about the animals. And one thing it says is like even the nursing child will play by the hole of the cobra, and the weaned child will put his hand on the viper's den. So like even a child will be able to just play near where there's snakes, and it's like there's nothing to worry about. One thing that stood out. Oh, where was I? Where is it? Oh man, kind of lost my spot here. But yeah, 11:7. Where is it? 11:7. Where are you? Hang on. Give me a second. Oh, it was in, so this is Isaiah 42:7. Got that mixed up. Sorry. So reading in Isaiah, still in Isaiah. So it's talking about this prince to come. And one thing that this person's going to do that's coming, this is actually Isaiah 42:7. And it says, open the eyes of the blind. So this person will, and let me pull it up here. 42, Isaiah. Stay with me, y'all. Sorry, it's like just been a little bit more difficult to be prepared, but I'm like doing all these things, and I want to share is that they just kind of like are revelations for me. So Isaiah 42:7, right? Still talking about this person that's coming, that's been promised from God. And they were coming to open blind eyes, to bring out prisoners from the dungeon, and those who dwell in darkness from the prison. And when I read that, now I'm connecting back to like the sermon from this Sunday. It talked about, if you're familiar at all, about John the Baptist, who finds himself in prison. So a little history on John the Baptist. He is the one, like Jesus's cousin, and he's the one who they say kind of makes the way and paves the way for Jesus, and is baptizing people, and it ultimately ends up baptizing Jesus. And then God says that this is my son, and who I'm well pleased with, and the Spirit of God comes down. So John is this person who's this prophet in Jesus's time, who is just very bold, and probably like Jesus calls him like the goat of all prophets, and he was the best. And he literally just doing everything so Jesus has a clear path, and this is all like prophecy too. So in the older books, it talks about how that John, like somebody like John, will come to pave the way for somebody, for this awaited king, this awaited Messiah, Savior. And so John, right? So he's like Jesus's number one fan. And on Sunday, it talked about how even in that, so John found himself in prison one day though. And he got into prison because he was accusing Herod, which was a king for, I forgot like the mix, but essentially he's trying to like sleep or trying to get with like his brother's wife or something like that. I may have like the relationship with mixed up, but it's like some kind of like incest, something that was abomination, that like, hey, that's not right. You shouldn't be trying to sleep with like your brother's wife or something like that. And so John calls him out. It's like, hey, what you're doing is like abomination. It's so sinful, and it's blasphemy. Like you shouldn't be doing that. And John's really like, he's already done all this stuff to help Jesus and pave the way. And he's, just a great prophet. And now just like towards the end, he's just has this, like, he won't stop picking at Herod because he just sees this injustice. And ultimately he finds himself in prison for calling out Herod, the King Herod. And he found himself kind of down and out. It's like, man, like, why am I doing in prison? Like, I'm supposed to be God's chosen one, or at least the second chosen one. And like, I'm up there, and Jesus is the Messiah, and he's doing all these works, and he's definitely gaining a following and doing miracles. And like, well, actually, at this point, yeah, he had already done some miracles already in Matthew 11. And he's just proven like, this is the guy, this is the king who's going to come and rescue us and save us and be the Messiah and going to take over. And so he's in prison thinking like, man, I shouldn't be in prison. Like, Jesus is my cousin. Like, we are going to take over. And so he sends a message to Jesus saying like, hey, Jesus, are you the Messiah? Kind of like, because if you are, like, why am I still in prison? And Jesus reports back to him, right? The blind see again, the crippled walk, lepers are cured, the deaf hear, the dead are raising back to life, and the poor and broken now hear of the hope of salvation. Tell John that the blessing of heaven comes to those who are not offended over me. So he doesn't tell him like, all right, cuz like I'm breaking you out of prison. Like, no worries. I'm ruling everything, so don't worry. And I find that interesting. The reason why I said Isaiah 42 is because it also says to open blind eyes. And that's one of the things Jesus mentioned, right? All those things that he's doing, these are all like, you can find them all in the older books, that they're prophecies that the person that's going to come, who Jesus is pretty much fulfilling, is going to do all those things. I just find it interesting because in Isaiah 42, it then follows. So after the open blind eyes, it says to bring out prisoners from the dungeon and those who dwell in darkness from the prison. And so maybe John thought, when he saw like to open blind eyes and all those other things, he thought, okay, also like, I'm a prisoner, like, take me out of the dungeon. Because, and Jesus didn't need to necessarily say that, people at this time, Jewish people at this time, were so well versed in these scriptures, like they had them memorized, that you can literally just say like to open blind eyes, to bring out prisoners from the dungeon. Like, they could tell you, oh, that's Isaiah, right? And they can like probably tell you the whole thing, like memorized. So all you had to do was say small parts of scripture, and that would like point to addresses. And I've talked about this before in the past. So to me, knowing that John for sure probably had this in mind, and I think Jesus was telling him that, in short, that John, like, I am the Messiah. The things are happening that are supposed to happen, but maybe not the way you expected it. Like, I didn't come to topple over rulers and violently fight and war with the Romans. I'm coming to bring a new kingdom that goes deeper than that. A kingdom that is about internal things and about spiritual things and about freeing us from the prison inside, not the prison that you're physically in, John. And it's so crazy how, for me, perhaps, right, I'm speculating that in Jesus saying that John would see that, and Jesus kind of challenging him to see that verse in Isaiah 42 in a new light, that it wouldn't be from a physical prison. It's from the prison of darkness and fear and anxiety that's in his soul about what's going to happen to him if he stays in this prison. But actually that Jesus comes to free us from an internal spiritual prison that cannot be closed, and there's no amount of darkness that can close that off, whether you're in prison or about to be killed or going to lose your house or you lost your job. No, Jesus comes to talk about a light that is so bright, and the promise that he is, that can overpowers any of that. And so even John perhaps wasn't quite getting it right, and he was challenged with that, and he ultimately, unfortunately, he dies. And I found it also interesting, as I'm kind of just tracking you here with like my Bible study. It's like, sometimes I think, and forgive me, like listeners, and forgive me, God, if I'm going too far, but sometimes I wonder, and maybe this is the wrong way to say it, and it sounds a little harsh this way, but like, was John out of line in calling out Herod? And I don't mean like out of line, like, what do you think you're doing? But, we can all get caught up in things that are going on that we see that are unjust. And it seems like some scholars believe that John when he was fulfilling his role, what he was meant to do, and what God's will was over his life, was to make the way for Jesus, right? And that was it. However, he also decided to get into like political reform and wanted to call out this king. And not to say that it was something wrong, because Jesus doesn't tell him like, you shouldn't have done that. What were you thinking? Like, that wasn't what you were supposed to do. He doesn't. Jesus is definitely compassionate. And even after that says how John was the greatest of them all, right? And nobody can match him. All the prophets that came before, none of them match what John did. But he doesn't free him from prison. And he doesn't tell him like, you shouldn't be here in the first place. But I'm just speculating, perhaps because Jesus never really, he doesn't confront Herod and say like, hey, John is right. You shouldn't have done that. Like, let him go. Jesus does talk about him in Luke 13:32. And so he's getting questioned about that, about Herod. And he says, go tell that fox that, the sick are being healed and the blind are seeing and the prisoners are being freed. And he's saying like pretty much what he was telling John, but he just tells him like, go tell that fox, which kind of would have been offensive. But he doesn't outright like do the same thing that John did. So I just wonder sometimes like if John's zeal kind of led him that way to calling out Herod. He wasn't wrong, right? He was doing something that he felt like was just. But I'm just curious, and Jesus did things too that were kind of like protesting and things like that. And I don't know, something I've wrestled with, like, what was John supposed to do that, like, quote unquote, like maybe he wasn't supposed to go to prison, and I don't know, but he definitely felt so passionate about that topic and about what was going on. And maybe he thought that Jesus have his back, like physically, and that I can, say this because I know who my cousin is. He's the king and he's going to destroy this kingdom. But maybe he didn't quite understand that Jesus was calling him and his followers to a kingdom that was bigger than that. It was one that was overtaking not just kings of that time, but a whole system, right? A whole system that said that you needed to have such amount of money. You needed to be of this family, of this ethnicity. You needed to be a Roman, and you needed to worship this God. It was one that said, no, the thing that ultimately matters is going to be like love and justice and unity and forgiveness and sacrifice. Like, these are the things that he was trying to bring into a world, like to rule in that way, that it would challenge these systems, not just this one King Herod. And that when that system is challenged, that it can bring a reality of when, and like, wolves are laying with lambs and lions are with the ox and the bear with the cow, right? And nobody's eating each other. And Isaiah 11 goes on to talk about how, like, Ephraim and Judah. So right now, like, this comes after, right? And it's kind of to follow it up. It's like, yes, they're talking about animals, but really they're talking about just groups of people. So like even northern Israel and southern Israel, which started to hate each other, they will no longer be enemies to each other. They'll no longer bicker with each other. They'll both, like the animals, like become a family together. And that is only through, though, and what John, who was trying to tell John, is like through peace, through sacrifice, through love, through forgiveness, right? And doing these things for sure in a peaceful way to challenge them. And it kind of got reminded of hearing those things, of like how even Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. says how right? The former white slave, the former slave and the former slave owner will be together, in harmony, right? In his dream of how like white children and black children would be together. And I think very much so that his dream and where he got some of those ideas were from these same kind of prophecies and the same kind of work that Jesus was trying to bring onto earth, is that you can bring the oppressor and the oppressed, and they both can be set free to be in this world that Jesus is trying to get us to, where we can become a family and be together and in peace. And so I don't know necessarily like what is like the message I'm trying to say here, but this is just me processing as I'm reading through these books and these scriptures and stories, and how we want things to physically feel free, right? We want to have this amount of money. We want to have this relationship. We want our kids to go to this college, and for things, for people maybe to get out of prison or for healings. And ultimately Jesus is like, wait, I didn't come to necessarily free you from like capitalism. It's like there is something deeper that I'm trying to bring here that is going to revolutionize the whole system of the world and can free everybody, from the person who is greedy and oppressing you with debt to the person who is in like debt collection and going to lose their house. It's like, if you can just follow my ways. And I don't have a lot to go into there as I'm still reading through this, even though I know, and I've been saying like a lot of like Jesus's teachings. And I just think that's so revolutionary. And it's just so, I think when they talk about how the gospel is offensive, it's really in that way, how it's challenging like the status quo of society from 2,000 years ago till today. Like we're not living in a post like Jesus following like society. It's just not that. To me, it's not. And I think that's it. I'm about at 30 minutes now. And so I'll continue to try to do these recordings. Like I said, I do want to bring on some guests. I won't have an episode next week. I can guarantee you that 100%. I thank everyone for listening. If you've listened this long, like, you're amazing. And maybe what you found was interesting. I know I was a little bit all over the place, trying to be as organized as I can to bring something interesting of just what I'm experiencing in my readings, and hopefully you find it interesting as well. And hope it just blesses your life and maybe just helps you to rethink or dive a little deeper into these stories that help to shape us to follow in the example and the teachings that Jesus is. And so until next time, everybody, peace.